So hi everyone, welcome to this CDRN session today. We're really excited to be hosting both Dr. Joy Semien, who's going to join us in just a moment, as well as Dr. Michaud, who are going to speak to us today about building resilience through communication and collaboration, cross-sectoral strategies for weather and community preparedness. So I think we'll kick off with Michael, and we'll go through both presentations first. So if I could ask you to hold your questions for the end, we should have about 10-15 minutes for discussion at the end there. But I will hand over to you, Michael, and thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I definitely appreciate being invited and sharing some of the work that we're doing. So first, an introduction. My name is Mike Michaud. I am the Risk Communication Scientist for the New York State Weather Risk Communication Center. A little bit of background for me. I did my undergraduate degree in atmospheric science. So I had my formal training in meteorology, and then I decided to switch and focus more on the social science side. So I then got my PhD in disaster science and management from the University of Delaware. So I'm really interested kind of in this intersection of how weather impacts society, how are emergency managers responding to that and preparing their communities for different types of weather impacts. So a quick introduction to our center. We are pretty new. We started almost 2 years ago. December will be our 2-year anniversary. And we were really created to provide weather information for the state, for all different public entities in the state, whether that's at the state level or at the local level. We're really here just to provide whatever weather information and insights that we can. We work very closely with a couple of different partners, which I'll share on the next slide. But we're here to support however we can. We're a team of mostly meteorologists, social scientists, which is me, and then also a couple of different computer programmers, and I'll introduce you to the full team in just a minute. But the services generally that we provide is a daily statewide weather briefing that gets sent out to about 700, 800 different partners to help them understand what the weather is going to look like over the next couple of days. We do spot forecasts, so these are specific forecasts for a specific location that are usually requested. Generally, they're large events that different entities will host. We also do data requests, so if local counties or areas are looking for specific weather information about an impactful event that they had. We've also helped the state pull together different types of weather information for disaster declarations. So any kind of data requests we're able to help with. Then we also provide training opportunities. So we have developed a class for emergency managers to help them understand weather information a little bit more broadly. And then we can also help different entities with different kinds of exercises. So preparing fake weather information for a tabletop exercise or for full-scale exercise, providing that information so that way they can have a very realistic scenario that they're going through. So this is a look at some of the different partners that we work with. Our main federal partner is the National Weather Service. So we really work hand in hand with the National Weather Service to making sure that we're consistent with the messaging that they're sending out in addition to ours. Within New York State, we have 5 different weather service offices that forecast for the area. And we work with all 5 of them. We're actually located in the same building as the Albany office, which is also the state liaison. So they're kind of responsible for sending out statewide briefings for New York. So we work very closely with them. We meet with them every morning to make sure that we have a consistent message and that we're kind of supporting the work that they're doing in working with all of our partners. As far as our local partners, we work very closely with the New York Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, which also hosts the Office of Emergency Management. So they are our main partner, the ones that we work with most closely, but we also work very closely with Department of Transportation, the New York Thruway Authority, Parks and Recreation are some of the ones that we work with most. But all of the different organizations that are here on the slide, we've worked with and we provide weather information with. So all the way from state and the highest level at the state level, all the way down to different counties and towns as well. Meeting our team, we are a staff of 10. So we do have our director, which is Dr. Nick Bosel, who had started the center about 2 years ago, as I mentioned. We then have our operational team. So these are meteorologists that are doing forecasting day to day, creating the different briefings and sending them out. That's led by Allison Finch, who is our lead meteorologist. And then we have 4 meteorologists, Katie, Carson, Ethan, and Jordan, who do all of that the operational work. And then we have 3 specialists, kind of specialty positions is what we call ourselves. So I'm the risk communication scientist. I am very much focused on how are we communicating information to our partners? How are we checking in with our partners to make sure that we're meeting our needs, using social science research to make sure that we're backing our operations in the best available research that we have. We also then have more kind of computery specialists. Dr. Alex Jakes, who is our meteorological product scientist. He uses and processes a lot of different weather information, putting them in different graphics or different tools that either we can use internally or our partners can use externally. And then we have Dr. Daniel Van Hosen, who is our software engineer, who is creating our website and making sure that there's different dynamic tools that partners will be able to use. And I'll talk through both of those a little bit more. We also have Kathy, our administrator, and then we also have 4 or 5 interns that we hire, both from the atmospheric science department and for the emergency preparedness, homeland security departments. So that way they're diving in, they're getting real world experience with the work that we're doing. Okay, so now I'll walk through some of the operational tools and some of the things that we've created for our partners. So one of the big things is the daily weather briefing. So like I said, this gets sent out to about 700, 800 partners across the state, lots of Department of Transportation and Office of Emergency Management people who get these briefings. And the main part really of this is to provide a look of what's to come over the next week. So we provide a forecast for the next 7 days, which is the first couple pages, and then we have a whole list of different weather adjacent aspects and resources that emergency managers like to use. All of these are external that we pull in. There's many different websites you can go to, but we put it all into our briefing so that way there's only one place that emergency managers need to go to look. So if you wanted to look at the air quality forecast, you'd have to go to one page. If you wanted to look at the tropical outlook, you'd have to go to the National Hurricane Center on a different page. If you want to look at space weather, you'd have to go to a different page. So we pull all of these in so that way emergency managers will get our briefing in the morning. They can scroll through it, look at what's most important to them, and they don't have to go to all of these different websites. Looking specifically at the forecasting that we're doing, this is the first page of our weather briefing, and we really try to lay it out so that way it's as easy as possible for emergency managers to pull out the information that they need in a way that really decreases that cognitive load, how much time they're spending looking at it. So we try to use a very consistent format and highlight what they need to know. So we start with the bluff, which is bottom line up front, something that emergency managers like to use in a lot of their intelligence information that's out there. So this is just a very quick 1 or 2 sentence explanation of the weather to come over the next week. And then we also have our statewide weather impacts chart, where we identify what are the possible hazards that are coming up, what are the expected impacts that you may see. We use colors in here to help identify, okay, this area might be a little bit more impacted by this type of hazard than others. And I'm going to dive into this a little bit more because this is something that we're currently researching to make sure that we're communicating in the best way that we can. Looking at the forecast slides themselves, there's a lot of information that we put on here, and we base it really off of what our partners have said that they need. So we start off with the date to make sure people are looking at the most up-to-date information, sharing the confidence that we have on the specific forecast, writing an overview of what's to come, noting different forecast changes since the last edition that we had, breaking down the different types of hazards that are to come, and then also calling out the impacts. We're really trying to be impact forward in what are the impacts that different partners might expect. We use you can see we use a lot of colors here. Using social science research, we know that keeping a common format is helpful for people to pull off information as quickly as they can, but also using colors to identify different areas. So you can see here any type of alert that the National Weather Service has put out will highlight a color specific to the color that they use for that type of hazard or that alert. And then we'll also indicate our impacts with a color as well. So on this day, we were expecting moderate impacts from rain, thunderstorms, and flooding. So we highlighted that as the yellow, the moderate yellow that we use for calling out moderate impacts. We also use a lot of graphics to make sure that we're communicating information both in text form, but also graphically, so if it's a little bit easier to pull that information off from a graphic form. We are creating our briefings based off of social science research. There hasn't been a lot on what kinds of weather information emergency managers use in their daily operations. But one study did find that the six big things that emergency managers need to know is the threat or the magnitude of the threat, timing, location, duration, which also can fit into the timing, history, so that's whether it's something that doesn't happen often or if it's something that's continuing, what's the last couple of days history of this, and then forecaster confidence. So we've pulled all of those into our format that we use every single day. We start off with an overview of the hazards that we're expecting. Then we break down what the confidence is. If confidence is not high, then we generally will have a statement along what's unknown. Is it the peak rainfalls that we're unsure about? Is the timing? Is it the location? Is it all of them? So that way emergency managers can know what we're confident about, what we're not confident about. We then get into the timing for each of our hazards, location, the amounts. The amounts kind of ties in with that magnitude piece. Then what are the impacts? So we do that for every single one of the hazards that we're forecasting for within each of those time periods. And we've heard back from emergency managers that they really do like this format. It quickly gives them the information that they need before moving on with the decisions that they need to make. In addition to the text information, we do use a lot of different graphics to help break out different information that can be absorbed in a different way. This is a couple examples of common graphics that we use that break down information either over time or over space. So a couple examples I'll jump into. So this is a timeline graphic that we will often use during the winter. Back a couple years ago, there was a pretty severe snow event in the Western New York in the Buffalo area that unfortunately caused some loss of life. And there's a lot of very impactful weather that was happening. Emergency managers told us that they knew that it was going to snow, they knew it was going to be windy, and they knew that the temperatures were going to drop, but they didn't realize it was all going to happen at once, that there was going to be this compounding effect. So they weren't necessarily prepared for the way that they wanted to be. So we created these timelines to really help to highlight when different hazards are going to be occurring. So this is an example from a snowstorm last year, and on it we really broke down, okay, what types of snow are we expecting when are we expecting heavy snow, when are we expecting light snow, when are the winds going to be happening, when are the temperatures going to drop. So we use this to really highlight over time at a kind of a general, within a more specific area of what to expect. And on this, we can highlight different things that are happening. We highlighted the worst impacts, so kind of this time frame of when we're expecting the worst impacts. In Western New York, there is the Buffalo Bills. There was a game that was happening right around this time. So we put an icon there to help identify when that game was happening. Emergency managers in Western New York spend a lot of time preparing for an influx of people to the stadium during that time, so it's important to call out. And then we can also highlight out different commute times so that way emergency managers are focusing in on areas that might have higher traffic or areas where they might need to do things a little bit differently depending on the situation. Looking more from a geographic location, we also provide maps of the entire state of New York and what different areas can expect. So this was a different event where there's mostly rain expected throughout most of the state, kind of southern parts of the state. It was going to be windy, kind of along the I-90 line, if you're familiar with New York geography. Um, Highlighting what different areas are there. Kind of northern Newark calling out that there could be accumulating snow, and then kind of within the whole area there could be freezing rain as well. So this really helps us. New York is a pretty large state. It can be very diverse as far as weather at different times. So by using these more geographic representations of the state, we can help identify what to expect in different areas. So between the time and location and the geographic products like this, we can really help identify what emergency managers should expect in the days ahead. We also put out different types of updates if there's ongoing weather. So this is from one of those updates, and it really calls out when we expect rain to be in different storms to be impacting different parts of the state. So this is a little bit more narrow view of specific timing. We can show the motion of a storm. Sometimes if there's an area, a part of the state that the hazard is over, we'll kind of circle it saying this is all clear. You don't need to worry about this anymore. This really helps give our partners an understanding of kind of real world decision making, what's happening in the moment, what decisions do they need to make in the next hour or two to make sure that they're prepared. Either that's staging resources ahead of time as different types of weather are coming in. Shifting a little bit, looking at different types of specialty products that we have. I mentioned that we do spot forecasts. So all the way on the left is an example of a spot forecast that we put out for one of our partners. They specifically mentioned that they wanted to know information about rain, thunderstorms, winds, and temperatures for this event. So we created this spot forecast that shows, again, a timeline of when they can expect different types of weather information, different types of weather to come through. We indicate what our forecast confidence is. We also provide a quick summary of what to expect, kind of like the bluff format that I mentioned in the daily weather briefing. And then we give a little bit more detail about the different hazards that are coming, some timing information, location information. Although this is a spot forecast, it's a specific point, so a little bit focused on the location information, but focusing on those impacts. The center here is one of those updates that I mentioned. This was put out at 8 p.m. a couple of days ago of storms that were moving throughout the state. Really focusing on kind of what's been observed, what do we have to look ahead, what are the impacts that are happening, what National Weather Service alerts are currently out. Helps gives like I said, our partners an operational picture of what's happening, what to expect. And then all the way on the right here is a kind of more of an outlook. This is something that we'll put together usually by request. Generally, it'll be when somebody in the state, either commissioner or director level, will see something on Twitter or X or something on social media of, hey, big snowstorm coming in a couple of days, and we'll often get questions about that. So we'll create kind of an outlook, breaking down what is it that we're expecting, what do we know, what don't we know. What are some different scenarios that could happen? This is one example from some hurricanes that were coming up the coast about a month or so ago now, 2 months, I guess, at this point. And kind of breaking it down of this is what the different scenarios are, this is the worst case, this is the most likely, trying to make sure that emergency managers understand kind of the range of what's possible. They like to be able to prepare for worst case whilst also knowing what's the most likely scenario. So we try to break that down for them as well. One last thing in this section I'll talk about is a class that we started putting together. So this is kind of equivalent of a one credit college class. It's not for credit, but we can offer a certification for people who complete it. So it's an introduction to weather interpretation. And what it is about 15 hours or so of going through different weather topics. So we talk about weather conditions, what creates different kinds of weather conditions, what is weather data, how do you read it, how do you understand it, how are those observations collected. We then move into the forecast process, talking about different tools that are used, both by meteorologists, but what else is available to the public for them to use. Diving in a little bit into weather models. We know people are out there using them, possibly not understanding them, so we want to make sure that we're providing information about how they work, so that way when people are looking at them, they understand kind of the biases they have, what it can be useful, what it can't be useful for. We work with the National Weather Service. They teach part of the section on some of their different products and tools that are available. We also dive into different types of weather information sources. And then we wrap up with how do you communicate weather impacts and weather information? What are different kinds of weather impacts? So we kind of go through all of those different pieces. This class really is focused around emergency managers, transportation officials, and other community leaders and decision makers. Right now, it's only available to public sector, so states and local employees. We just had our pilot test over the summer and are excited to offer our second class with the New York City Office of Emergency Management coming up in January. So we're excited to hold that and to then broaden it to a little bit more to the entire state and teaching some additional classes there. Okay, so moving forward a little bit into some of the research and evaluation that we do within the center. Much more of it is on the evaluation side, evaluating the products that we have, but we are doing some research as well. So one of the things that we're doing is developing a website for our partners. This is really designed to be something in addition to our daily briefing. The daily briefing and spot forecasts and updates will still be sent out. But this is really to be a look and offer different tools for emergency managers and other partners kind of in those in-between times. So we know that risk communication is really based off of your audience. It's really hard to create a kind of a one-size-fits-all way to communicate information. So we're looking at different sectors of our partners to break down different types of products or different tools that they might be interested in. So eventually, we're hoping to have pages that really focuses on transportation. So what are things that transportation officials need to know? What are things that those that are maintaining utilities really need to know? What are things that emergency managers really need to know? So having different tabs with different types of information, really focusing on those different audiences and what those needs are. So for example, this is an overview here of the New York State with different National Weather Service alerts that are going on. And we also overlaid residencies across the state. So residencies is what the Department of Transportation uses to manage their snow plows. So each area within here, kind of close to their counties, a little bit different, but it helps identify within a different locations what people can expect and what they're looking for. So still in development, very exciting. We're hoping to roll this out to our partners very soon. We're also creating a phone app, a cell phone app that we're rolling out probably in the next week or so, doing some beta testing, collecting feedback from our partners to understand how they use this type of app, what other information do they want out of it. Another thing that we're doing is creating internal tools for our meteorologists to use. So a little bit complex here, a lot of different images, but what this really is looking at how different weather models are presenting information. So a lot of weather models now don't just tell you kind of deterministic, this is what's going to happen. It gives you a range of possibilities. It gives you a range based off of model output of how likely something is to happen. So Alex, our product scientist, has put together these graphics to help our meteorologists understand, okay, there's a 5% chance of this happening, 95% chance of this happening, So this helps our meteorologists look and see, okay, well, what's going to be happening. These can go out much further than the National Weather Service produces information. So what we're showing here is the potential for National Weather Service alerts about 5 days out or so. So generally, the National Weather Service will issue alerts a day or two before something's expected, which isn't always enough time for our partners to get things ready. If you're moving snowplows from Buffalo, New York, and Western New York all the way down to Long Island, in Eastern New York, it's going to take more time than generally they'll get an alert for. So by looking far ahead, understanding, okay, there's a 50% chance that we may have some winter weather advisories here. It helps it helps us communicate to our partners that they may want to stage resources a little bit further ahead of time. We also provide different weather information to our partners, as I mentioned earlier, but here's a good example. So in New York State, we do have a lot of issues with snow squalls. If you're not familiar with snow squalls, they're kind of like a thunderstorm, just with very intense, heavy snow and heavy winds. So generally what will happen is we'll move in very quickly. You'll have a lot of snow coming down, a lot of wind. If you're traveling, it can make road conditions very dangerous, not only because the roads are slippery, but also because you can't see very well. So a lot of times during these snow squalls, you'll have large pileups where cars are getting into accidents. So the state obviously likes to try to prevent that as much as they can. So we created on the left here this graphic overlaying all of the different snow squall warnings that have been issued between 2018 and 2024 to give a sense of where they're happening within the state. You can see there's kind of a hot spot in central New York. So this really helps with decision making. Say emergency managers at the Department of Transportation want to install road signs to help warn motorists about possible snow squalls that they might be driving into. They know where they can focus. They can put most of these resources into the center, into central New York, where those are happening more often. On the right-hand side, we do have a kind of an overview from a severe weather events that happened this past April. A lot of our partners do need to write after action reports. They need to understand kind of what was impacting their areas. So we make graphics like this to help overlay where were the severe thunderstorm warnings, where was the tornado warning, where were their hail reports, where were their wind reports, and where was there a lot of power outages. So we make a lot of maps like this to help share that information to our partners. Diving in a little bit more into a lot of the work that I'm doing, I'm really trying to focus in on understanding our partners. Who are our audiences? What do they need? And how can we better provide risk information for them? So doing that through a couple of different approaches. We've been doing interviews with different partners, both at the county level and at the state level. We've been doing, or we are planning on doing focus groups, which I'll get into in just a minute. We've been doing surveys from our briefings to understand what's useful, what's not useful, how can we improve them, and I'll show an example of that. And then also doing observations, going into emergency operations centers, actually observing what types of weather information our partners are using during real life and simulated events. Just last week, I was in the emergency operations centers. They were doing a full-scale exercise, watching how they're using weather information, what kinds of information they needed. So here's a couple examples of how we've improved our different tools. On the left is an example of our old forecast, a spot forecast template. Use different colors to identify different impacts and potential weather that was coming in. After that season, we met with the emergency managers that received these forecasts, and they gave us a lot of feedback on what they wanted to see. So we added the timeline. That's something that they really wanted to see because it's really useful for them. Also added that overview up top of what to expect, and then still breaking down some of those impacts for different types of hazards. We also changed some of the things on our briefing. So on the top left here is a look of how we used to display information, specifically changes within the forecast. It's very helpful for emergency managers to know what's changed from time to time so they know how to adjust their operations based off of what's changed from the last time without needing to go back and look at past briefings. We used to highlight anything that was changed in red, but our partners said that it was a little bit harder to read that, to identify that. They didn't always necessarily know what's changed, just that something had changed. So now we include it kind of at the header of every single forecast page, as you can see on the bottom left. Breaking down, okay, what are the notable changes, specifically highlighting what is it that has changed. Another thing that we heard was that the colors we were using on our impact charts were a little bit difficult to see. It's difficult to distinguish between the orange and the yellow sometimes, so we made those colors a little bit darker. That seemed to help as well. Diving in a little bit deeper into some of the research that we're planning on working on over the next couple months. I mentioned the weather impact chart a couple times. This is really based off of a meteorological perspective of what's going to be happening. So rain impacts, flooding impacts, wind impacts, based off of what a meteorologist thinks is going to happen and how they think it's going to impact their different communities. We don't necessarily know how different communities are actually going to be impacted. So that's what we're really diving into is to make sure that we're understanding from those partners who are on the ground, doing the work, facing the impacts, making sure that we're aligning there. At the very early stages of our center, we created this kind of risk matrix. I kind of put it up as a joke because it's not very useful, but that's the whole point is right now we don't have a good way to describe what these different impacts mean. We do have kind of some general thresholds from the weather side that we've identified to help with consistency within our own forecasting across our meteorology team. But these are based again on the meteorology, not on the actual impacts. So, for example, if we expect winds 45 to 59 miles per hour, generally we'll put a moderate impacts on there. Or if the National Weather Service has issued widespread wind advisories or a high wind watch, we'll put out a moderate impact, but we don't really know how that's affecting communities directly. So we are diving into the study to ask two different research questions. What kinds of impacts do emergency managers experience from various kinds of weather in New York? And how do they categorize them? And then also, how do New York State emergency managers prefer weather impacts to be communicated? So we're going to use a chart kind of like this. We're going to ask, okay, right now we have four different kind of categories that we put weather into. Should it be more? Should it be less? Should it be 3 or 5? Is 4 good? Are the words that we're using good? Minor, moderate, extreme, high, extreme. Are these intuitive? Are there different words that we should be using to describe them? Once we know that, then diving into, okay, if we're saying moderate wind, what do you expect? What do you think is moderate wind impacts? Once we get this information, we'll be able to dive back, go back to our thresholds for our forecasting and adjust those to make sure that when we communicate moderate impacts, what we're communicating is actually what emergency managers are expecting. There hasn't been a ton of research on this, so we're excited to dive into this, hopefully publish some results of this in addition to helping our operations. So to do this, we are doing focus groups, specifically with state emergency managers, who will give kind of a state perspective, and then also state transportation officials. Obviously, transportation is very important, so looking at transportation specifically, and then going down a little bit deeper and looking at county emergency managers. We know from our conversations with the counties that they have a very different look than the state level, and what they need at the county level is very different than the state level. So again, trying to create a tool that works for everyone is not very efficient and doesn't always work. So we're going to be diving into different areas to make sure that we're communicating that information the best that we can. So with that, I will wrap up. I think we're saving questions to the end, but I'll be very happy to answer any questions once it's time for that.
Thanks very much, Michael.
Was did I hear that correctly? Are we doing questions at the end?
I'll jump back in. Thank you so much, Michael. That was really, really interesting. And I think that we'll save questions for the end. I saw that Joy
Great.
has joined um, the teams. So maybe if we'll move on to Joy now and we can group questions for both of you at the end, if that sounds okay. Um, so Joy, I don't know if can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Fabulous. Great. Great. So if you'd like to, we'll hand over to you if you'd like to run through a presentation, if you have any slides to share, definitely go ahead and share those. And we will take questions from both of you at the end, if that's okay.
Okay, that sounds good. Let me share my screen. Okay, let me know if you can hear and see that.
We can hear you. We can see them. The screen as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. So my name is Dr. Joy Semien. I am privileged to be here. So today I'm going to talk about how we use our CAPS method as a cross-sectoral approach to build community resilience. And so essentially all that means is how do we take this one method of educating the community across all kind of sectors, right? And so again, let's see. So again, my name is Dr. Joy Semien. I'm considered to be a disaster educator. I have a background in bachelor's in biology and chemistry from Dillard University. I have a PhD from Texas A&M, and I've authored over 16 books on disaster education. So what's interesting is that I grew up in a small community. It's called Geismar, Louisiana. You can see it here. And these little white spots, they're all industries, right? So they're all chemical plants. And so I should have put a map of what Louisiana looks like, but we're about 60 minutes from the coastline. So we're also getting impacted by floods and hurricanes and all of these things, right? So we're both getting hit with anthropogenic disasters and also natural disasters. And we're doing that on a consistent basis. And as a kid, I wanted to know like why was people in my family dying of cancer? Why was our houses getting flooded? So I went to school, did all these great things, right? And then when I got out of school, I was like, one of the things that I had to learn for myself is that we do all this research as scholars, but is this information then being put back into the community? And if it is, like, how is it? And what some of my research was showing is that it wasn't. Like, we literally sit at the lab all day long, we find all this stuff, and it may end up in the hands of policy, but it rarely ends in the hands of the people who actually need it the most, right? And so who we are. So I founded, so my major company is called Lead with Joy. And with Lead with Joy, we have a sub-arm, it's called the CAPS Disaster Hub. And so my biggest thing is, and CAPS stands for teaching knowledge, and it's supposed to be attitude, sorry. So knowledge, attitude, preparedness, and skills for people, right? And so even my Lead with Joy has an acronym of like, how do we go into a community, listen, educate, empower, and drive change across local communities? And so what I did was, when I was getting my master's at Texas Southern, I was able to come up with a model that was then be able to replicate. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today is about that model, how we've replicated, and then, hopefully how you can probably replicate it and adapt it into your own industries. So we'll go ahead and get started. So today, like I said, I'm here to share our CAPS method and how we help communities everywhere basically prepare, respond, and recover from disasters, right? So we're going to have like 4 different sections. So disasters and communities, we're going to look at that. We're going to talk about the actual CAPS framework and how we created it. And then we'll talk about some of the work that we're doing now. So that cross-sector application, and then how it can be replicated and adapted, and even some of the things that we even took that base model and was able to replicate as well. So some of the challenges, right? So we're all disaster scholars or want or have interest in disasters, right? So since 1980, global disasters have risen. We all know that. So we're seeing that it's increasing both in intensity and also in frequency, right? And so they're affecting over 244 million people a year by this statistic. And they're costing over $28 billion, right? So communities are becoming increasingly concerned for their health, safety, and welfare. And, even today in the climate, the political climate that we're in, we're seeing so many changes where people were like, well, I thought this group of people were supposed to help me. And then now we've seen all these different changes and we're like, okay, well, what do I do? So, I mean, and that's kind of what we think about with disasters, like how do we help the communities that need it the most, right? And so I don't have any individual statistics. I use this presentation for businesses and nonprofits when I'm talking to them, but I wanted to point out a couple of things, right? So 25% of businesses fail within a year of disaster, right? 62% of nonprofits experience financial instability after disaster. Now, why am I telling you this, right? So it's funny because when we look at the research, businesses and nonprofits, they're our hands and feet of who help the community after, whenever the government can't reach there in time or, whatever those resources can't get there. So if our nonprofits and our businesses can't even, succeed after a disaster, I mean, what do we expect our actual communities to do, right? And so I'm sure there's a whole bunch of individual statistics and households. We know that, right? We see it through Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy and like all the events that happen all the time. But the reality is disaster resilience education is needed. So how do we go into the actual communities themselves and teach them how to survive until help arrives, right? So we use education as a method. Obviously, it's not the end all. Like there's so many things that we can do with disasters to help, them advance and all kinds of things. But my thing is education. So how do we turn this research into action? And so when we first looked at looking at how CAPS could be developed, I looked at a study. It was by Mutrick and Lutz in 2014. And so one of the things that their study was saying is like, education is key. And they were saying that, you can have a direct effect, right? We're going to build cognitive skills. We're going to build problem solving skills. We're going to have better knowledge. We're going to increase risk perception, all of that stuff. And then it also can have an indirect effect, right? We're going to reduce poverty. We're going to have access to information. We're going to build social capital, all of those things to introduce vulnerability. But then when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, that's cute. That's great. Yeah, we know those things already. But at the end of the day, how do we really change the people? And so this is what I came up with, right? So let me identify the problem for you. So a lot of the trainings and education that happens in communities is that it's from top down, right? You have these big nonprofits that'll come into the community and say, okay, it's June, we're going to do disaster preparedness trainings, right? That's what we're going to do. And they just come in, they give a lecture, they provide people with a piece of paper with information, and then they walk away. Right. And so I was like, well, how do you actually do this from a bottom up perspective? And so that was one of the things that I wanted to know. These were the workshops, they're often socially and culturally unrelatable, meaning you may have a very diverse population, like in New York or in Houston, or even in the small town that I grew up in, Geismar, where there's predominant Hispanic and Asian populations. It's a mix with multiple languages and culture and religions. So, how do we embrace every single person that is literally living next door to you in a respectful manner, right? And so residents also have limited access to trainings, right? You may not be able to even get transportation or get off of work. So what can we do to really put that information in the hands of the people who need it? So, and the other thing is sometimes we don't trust the government, right? Residents do not know how to even utilize local and federal resources. And a lot of the populations that I work with, they're elderly. They don't even know how to use a computer or an iPhone, right? And we don't always think about that. And so those were some of the questions and problems that I saw in the literature while I was doing this study. And so I wanted to bridge that gap. And so this is an expanded version of me adding on to what Mutrick and Lutz was saying in their paper, right? And so I felt like they were missing attitude changes, right? So how do we embrace everybody? How do we put the local officials and the community leaders and the national officials and the historic, variations in demographics? How do we do all of that stuff and put everybody at the table? And that was my goal to figure that out. And I kind of did, just a little bit. But I wanted to use a constructivist learning approach, right? So we weren't just going to use face-to-face training. We weren't just going to provide resource guides and just do lecture styles. And we wanted to do everything. We wanted to meet every learner where they were at. And so what I did was I bridged that gap by developing community partnerships, right? Connecting with local churches and businesses and community leaders before hosting an event, right? We developed a constructivist teaching method, right? To teach participants how to access disaster resources. Everything was hands on, teaching participants how to use a disaster kit or a muck bucket or what those things are, and actually supplying them with that because we also know that these social vulnerability populations, socially vulnerable populations, they can't even afford food on the table. So how do you want them to go purchase a disaster kit and design a community-based workshop that incorporated all of those things? So that's how we bridge the gap. So, like I said, I call this the CAPS method. So, knowledge, attitude, preparedness, and skills. How do we increase knowledge? How do we change people's attitudes? How do we get them to prepare? And then, how do we also build their skills? So this is how we developed that CAPS framework, right? So again, my interest was literally in disaster preparedness knowledge. That's where my niche is. Environmental justice and climate resilience is where I am. And so again, we looked at types of literatures from academic and also just to basic political training. So like in the government offices and in UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, how do they do their trainings? And then I developed the CAPS framework around that. So the first case study that I'll show you is from Geismar. Like I said, I grew up in this small community. It's small, it's unincorporated, it's right along the Mississippi Chemical Corridor. So there's like literally hundreds of chemical plants that stretch from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. And so these people, they live there and they're in these areas, they're historically African American homes that are there, right? And the story behind this, just in case you're interested, is that these were formerly plantation lands, right? And so after slavery, after those things occurred, these people brought that land, and then industry started to move in not too short after. And so a lot of these people, they're historically low income. In this specific community, there's less than a 10 square mile radius. There's over 100 industrial plants within a 10 square mile radius. Okay, so like we literally lived across the street from these chemical plants. And like I told you earlier, they were impacted by anthropogenic and natural disasters, so man-made and natural disasters. And these people live like that every single day. So what I wanted to do was go back home and say, hey, okay, how do I teach these people how to prepare for disasters? So what I did was I interviewed local disaster preparedness specialists right in the area. Then I did national. I said I wanted to know what Columbia was doing. Like, how do you educate the communities? Then I synthesized all that information and then I put it into those 4 frameworks, right? So knowledge, attitude, preparedness, and skills. So then I started recruiting people, of course. I used a random sample at first and realized this is not going to work for this community. So I'm going to use a convenient sample. So I started handing out flyers and posting boards and I did all kinds of things like word of mouth and using social media just to get people to come to the table. And that was one of the hardest things to do was to get people to gain interest. But once we did, it did provide more traction. So how did we develop our workshop? How did we host our workshop? So we did a pre-evaluation, of course, to see where their baseline knowledge was. Then I went into creating a lecture, and that lecture was specifically about knowledge and attitude, but it wasn't just me talking to them, right? So what did I do? I broke it up into several different modules. I had hands-on activities throughout the entire presentation, whether it was call and response, whether it was them having to hand me something. People were active, people were engaged, and that was the key to make sure that we had that tangible learning when they left. And then finally, we went into the preparedness and skills building. So I said, before you leave out of my classroom, I need to know that you know how to go do these things. Whether it was designing a plan, what is it, designing a kit, whatever it was. And so we grouped all these strangers together and we said, and we gave them different scenarios and said, how do you address these scenarios? What's the difference between reacting and responding? How do you get your kids out the door if there's water flooding in your house or the siren is going off, right? So that was some of the things that we actually looked at. And then, of course, we did a post evaluation and then we gave everybody a gift, which is my favorite part. I love being able to bless people and let them be able to take home things. So our evaluation, we broke it up into what and how, right? So the what, we wanted to understand, do they understand how to access these resources? Are they aware of what's available to them? What kind of facts and information do they need about specific, okay, this is a hurricane, this is a flood, this is hail, how do I address those things? And then we went into the how, right? So are you able, are you willing, do you want to even do this? And we assessed that and built an index that we now call the CAPS index. And so that's how we actually measure whether people are having a change in knowledge across the board from attending our workshops. And so that was what was important for us to do. So at the end of the day, what did we find out, right? So participants in this small community, they achieve statistically significant increases, right, in disaster knowledge, attitude changes, preparedness, and skills. The average response showed that participants thought the workshop was extremely helpful, clear, and interesting, which was our main goal, right? And then when we did our index, it showed that 21 participants out of 34 had gained a knowledge over 70%. And so that was our biggest thing, is that we wanted people to be able to leave with a tool, be able to leave with knowledge change, and we want to be able to tell their neighbors what to do next. So we also have, we ended up publishing, I was going to put a picture of the actual paper, but the paper is published and we also publish it into a book. So what was really cool about this is that the paper goes to, academic scholars so they can debate and decide if they like it and make it better, right? And then the book went into more of like, let me show you from start to finish how I did this, right? So we had literally every letter that I sent a business, every tool that I went to the interview processes with and interviewed national and federal and regional and local officials. I put all of that in the book and I said, if you ever want to replicate this again, here you go. Here's everything that you need. And we did it for both scholars and for people on the ground, so community leaders. And we made sure that that language was so simple so that people could understand. So ultimately, our study contributions, right? So we developed a constructivist method that was replicable, right? To deliver multi-hazard preparedness information to residents from a bottom-up perspective, right? And we developed a CAPS index that you can then take and reevaluate any workshop that you put on and be able to use it and understand if they had a change in knowledge, right? And so we created valid pre and post survey instruments that was replicable, which is also important because sometimes we don't take the time to evaluate the workshops to make sure people understand. So our next section is the cross-sector application. So I obviously have a PhD, I have a bachelor's, I have a master's, and I've been in school like the majority of my life, right? And so I could not get past academia, and I was like, we do all this work and we cannot get it in the hands of the people who need it in a way that they can understand it, right? So translating that research into action, and that was a big thing for me, and I could not get past it. So what did I decide to do? I decided to turn theory to practice, right? So I was like, I know this model works. Now, how do I get it to these people? And so what I did was I figured out how to take this CAP method and bridge it across research, community knowledge, and the implementation process, right? And moving it from just planning for a small pilot study across a global impact. And that was my main goal, right? And so I've been able to apply this model across several sectors, right? Businesses and nonprofits and academia and communities and even governments, right? And so it's been really interesting. And I wanted to highlight what we're doing now. So we've worked with a corporation. They were able to fund a bigger, I wouldn't even say a study, but a community investment project is what we've been able to do over the last 2 years. And they just, again, funded it again for the third year. So hopefully we'll be able to increase these numbers. So over the years, we've hosted 23 events using the same CAPS model, okay? Our total participants that we've been able to touch over the last 2 years is 845 people. Our average workshop holds 38 people. Neighborhoods that we've been able to touch here in Houston, Texas is about 10. Local vendors is 217, and then our CBO, so our event partners, have been 12. Why am I showing these numbers and why are these significant? Let me point some stuff out to you. First of all, it's really hard. If you've ever done a community workshop or a community event, it's really hard to get people to the table because first they have to care. So when we first started, we had maybe 15, 20 people that would show up. Well, when those people started showing up and we gave out really good gifts. So like this is a weatherization toolkit. This is like some of the activities that they were able to do, right? And like I'm serious, everybody has to work together to prove to me that they know how to do something before they leave, right? And so it's really hard to get people to show up, but when people start seeing how fun it is and inviting their neighbors, then our numbers increase, right? That's really important. That means that what we're doing is actually effective. One of the things that I wanted to point out was neighborhoods. So in a lot of cities, especially major cities, the neighborhoods are not just your zip code or not just, whatever. It's a block. It's a block of people, right? Community, that small community. And in Houston, Houston's very segregated based off of those communities. And each one of them have different problems. So just because I live, in one place and I might be dealing with flooding, somebody else might be dealing with industrial plants, right? And another community might be dealing with illegal dumping. So how do we then go into that community and give them a specifically targeted from a bottom up workshop that is beneficial to them, right? And that's one of the things that we actually worked on. And also I wanted to point out is the local vendors. So we use local vendors from that specific community. And so like from food to the places that we host the events, from how we invite, and then using those community-based organizations to bring in those people to be able to get the education that they need. So we were very strategic on how to deliver each and every single one of those things, right? So key success factors, right, is our trusted. We have to be a trusted partner. For me, I had recently moved to Houston when I had began to start this, and so people didn't really know me, but who they did know was those nonprofits, those community-based organizations. So I was like, hey, I have a set of money. If you help me, not only get to pocket this in-kind donation that I'll leave with you, but I'll also be able to fund you as well. So I'll give you a little small grant to host the workshop, and I'll give you a small grant to add to your operational budget for the year. And so what I like to say is we put our money where our mouth is, right? So many people come in, they're like, hey, can you help me? And then they just leave. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted to build something tangible and that people could also use all across the board. So again, we co-designed, hosted, and delivered a place-based community training, right? So we wanted to make sure that that community had the resources that they need. We invested in both economic and human infrastructure. What do I mean by that? We hired the same volunteers that the CBOs would use. We hired some of their staff members, right? And we allowed them to host their own workshops, and we allowed them to help us choose who should be the speakers. And we provided in-kind donations, and we contracted neighborhood vendors, like I said, and we created events that was literally designed for K through grade. And so I don't actually have the mascot on here, but one of the things that we would do is we had a kids corner. So while the parents were learning about disaster preparedness or weatherization or how to garden, we had the kids learning something similar at their level. So making sure that everybody in the family was able to learn and embrace those things, right? Our key success factor, again, was using that CAPS method to evaluate these workshops. And we used increased collaboration across sectors. We invited, people like the local council people would come out. And we were strategic on who those people that we were reaching out to say, hey, come and see what we're doing. Come hear about what we're doing. And so that way everybody can be educated. Our desire was to improve community resiliency, right? By tracking changes in knowledges and readiness. We wanted to make sure that CAPS was replicable and community-driven model was present even in these workshops. And so that brings me to my next section, or my last section, which is replication and adaptation. It's not just enough to just do something just to check a box and say, I did this study. We want to change people. It's also not enough just to get butts in the chairs. We want to make sure they have a change in knowledge, right? So we know that those dollars was spent in a way that was effective. So what we did was we expanded that CAPS model using this on these events that we just hosted, right? Our CAPS method, it provided a flexible and equity-centered roadmap that can be tailored to fit different communities. We already know, and the gentleman said it earlier, that there's no one size fit all, but I can give you a model that you can then create and adapt to the people that you work with in your community, right? And we built this on a universal principle: knowledge, attitude, preparedness, and skills that is adaptable both in urban, rural, and coastal contexts. And I showed you, even from a small town in Geismar, Louisiana, how this rural community and how CAPS was developed there and can be replicated across into urban environments, right? So we see that. That was something that was really important to us too. So our core steps for replication is to access local context, right? We want to engage cross-sector partners. We don't leave anybody behind. And even after we leave out of the community, we invite them to the next workshop to say, hey, do you want a vendor's table? Come sell your stuff, come donate your stuff. Let people know who you are, right? Customized trainings and tools. We build local leadership and we evaluate and evolve, because no workshop is the same, and every workshop has a problem. And every workshop has a challenge, and it's how you deal with those challenges that actually matter, right? So why do I think it works everywhere, right? So it focuses on people, not just the systems. We know that our systems are broken. We can see that every single day, every time we turn on the news. But I can't do anything about those systems. But what I can do is do something about the people that those systems affect. And I can encourage collaboration over competition. Instead of having these vendors compete for these services, I say, hey, let's collaborate. If you want to provide the drinks, well, they can provide the food. Let's bring all these people to the table at one time. We make sure that it's scalable, sustainable, and it's measurable, right? Because if it's not measurable and we don't have real data, then people aren't going to fund us. People aren't going to send us their money so we can host these things. They're just going to be like, you're just wasting time and money. So those are the things why I think that those things work. So what have I done with these things, right? So again, like the CAPS model, yes, we've been able to replicate it into different community workshops across Houston, actually across the nation, honestly. We've been able to even provide and translate this basic model that was designed for community workshops into handbooks that people could use. So what is that? There's 7 or 8 books, I believe now. I'm not sure if all of them are up here, but each one targets a different group of audience. And when I get these, people are like, hey, are they all for kids? And I'm like, no, only one. We just like the characters. So like this yellow book is for kids. This one's for families. We have things that's for organizations. We have for caregivers. We even have we just released this one, the Disaster Recovery Guide, and we have it in 2 different languages. We have it in Spanish and English, and hopefully next year we'll get it into Mandarin. But we're going to keep increasing and keep finding ways to educate communities, because that's the key, is like, how do we take this research and we turn it into actionable tools? And one of the things that I like to say is like, you know what? I don't want to be in a lab. I don't desire to go survey people. I know how to do it. I understand the principles. That's great. How about you just hire me? You do all the research. You send it to me, and I will make a program for the community and collaborate with those groups of people so that way we can actually turn your research and all the hard work that you did into actual programs that can actually help our communities. And so I wanted to show you a few other things that we actually highlight whenever we talk about the CAPS method. So one of the things that we actually just launched is our CAPS Disaster Hub. So on our hub, and this isn't the full website, you guys can go check it out. That's the QR code. But the core of the Disaster Hub is to be able to connect organizations, businesses, and nonprofits together. And then also our smaller nonprofits that can't afford to have a website, we have a community side so they can point people here. All they have to do is type in their nonprofit and they can see what kind of resources that are available. What's cool about this, I call this disaster Facebook. So one of the things that I learned when I was getting my PhD, when I was doing all these interviews with some businesses and nonprofits, is that they kept saying that when we put stuff on Facebook, like when there's a storm, we say, okay, we need some water. Well, that gets reshared over and over and over again. So when people are sending, resources that other nonprofits, they think these nonprofits need, now they have too much water. They have too many socks. They have too many of these things, and there's no way to track it. So what we did was design a Facebook for disasters, right? So businesses and nonprofits and scholars, they can all come on this platform and be able to see what other people need and provide it. We're even working on getting it global. So the map is obviously global, but getting international partners so that they can use it as well, because it's such a great tool to be able to put in the hands of people who needs it. And then the other thing that we're also working on to expand is our training platform. This is just an example of it. We're working to put courses on it before the end of next year. So it's live now. So like scholars can come in and say, okay, I want to teach a community leader how to do an interview. I want to teach them how to build a survey. They can do a 20-minute presentation, recording themselves with the very basics, and they can go on our platform and they can post it for like $30. They'll be able to pocket the money, and then a percentage of the money goes back into the community. So that's how we rotate that money, so that way people can actually get the resources that they need and be able to translate it. So we're working on getting more people to come in and build courses for us, right? And because everybody has a gift, everybody has a skill set. I can't teach everything because I don't understand GIS, but somebody can, right? They can make a GIS course and post it on our website, so that way communities can come in and say, okay, I need help with this. This is the basics. YouTube isn't everything, right? Um, Adaptability is one of the things that I wanted to point out as well. So one of the things that I love tools. Like if you ask anybody, I'm always creating a tool. This is a tool that I just used. So we were asked by a large nonprofit here in Houston to come in and host a continuity workshop. Okay. So we wanted to teach nonprofits, how do you actually build a continuity plan? Well, the common thing that people kept saying is, I don't have time to sit there and build a plan. Well, I was like, well, let me see if I can make this more efficient. Well, you know what I did? I created a tool. All you have to do if you own a business or a nonprofit is go in and fill out the survey, and it will output into a whole preparedness plan for you. It might take you about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour to fill it out, depending on how large or small your business or nonprofit is. And so that was something that I was interested in doing, is how do you we take these CAPS methods and replicate it, building tools, building resources, building trainings to get it into the hands that people need it the most. So that's something that we've done as well. So if you want to learn more about what we do with the CAPS Disaster Hub, you can, of course, join our newsletter. This is the QR code. But these are all the things that I literally have turned research into an actionable tools and resources that we've been able to get in the hands of community. I want to really thank you for allowing me to come and highlight some of the things that we've been able to do. Like I said, we use CAPS as a cross-sectoral approach to build community resilience. And these are some of the pictures that we did actually this year from some of the workshops. So just again, thank you so much. It's been a privilege.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Semien. Thank you, Dr. Michaud. It's incredible to see that there is this incredible synergy between the both presentations, right? Together, Dr. Semien and Dr. Michaud bring this complementary perspective, right? One strengthening how weather risks are communicated at the institutional level, and then the other presentation strengthening how communities organize, understand, and act on those messages to build resilience. And so if the people here would mind, I'm going to begin by asking one question each and then open up the floor for the other